A pre-recorded video floods the computer screens of one of Australia's most celebrated tech companies. The message slowly unfolding in the video is sobering. 150 employees will lose their jobs to artificial intelligence.
Some grim news today that could well be a portent of more to come, as 150 jobs disappear in the tech industries, jobs to be replaced by artificial intelligence.
For those watching the video, the irony of the situation is infuriating. Because the billionaire delivering the news from his mansion in Sydney has spent most of his career preaching about corporate responsibility and climate action, ideologies that have coldly escaped him at this moment. To make matters worse, those employees will soon find out that the $12 billion CEO delivering the message, Mike Cannon-Brookes, recently purchased a $75 million private jet while simultaneously campaigning against carbon emissions.
Revealed late last week that for all the climate virtue signalling this bloke does with, I suppose, amounts of money that, to be frank, is more like small change to him, Cannon-Brookes has tipped much larger amounts into, wait for it, his own personal jet.
To his employees, he is now the personification of elite hypocrisy.
But for Mike Cannon-Brookes, this is par for the course. His career was built on contradictions.
This is the man who co-built a software empire from nothing and then transformed from a naive college student to one of the world's most ambitious climate activists.
Unironically, if we're the lucky country, it's because of the amount of sun we have, the amount of wind we have, and our fortuitous geographic position in terms of the Indian Ocean, the sun, etc., and 3 billion consumers to the north who need our single greatest resources, which are our sun, our wind, our talent, and our finances.
Mike Cannon-Brookes' journey begins not with billions, but with a maxed out credit card and an audacious bet that would change everything we know about the business of technology. November 17th, 1979. While it's not always true that future billionaires are born into privilege, this was not the case with Mike Cannon-Brookes. He was born in Connecticut and was the son of a global banking executive, meaning they traveled a lot, and his family wouldn't stay in the ritzy East Coast state for long. Mike's childhood unfolds across many continents. At 6 months, his family moved to Taiwan and would find themselves in Hong Kong just 3 years later. Their next home is London, where Mike Cannon-Brookes attended a distinguished boarding school. By the late 1990s, the family settled in Sydney and enrolled him in the controversial all-male private school Cranbrook.
Cannon-Brookes' nomadic upbringing breeds adaptability, but the sacrifice is isolation. This would be an early learned lesson and skill that will prove to be invaluable throughout his life and career.
After high school, Mike earns a coveted scholarship to study information systems at the University of New South Wales. He's a brilliant but unremarkable student, just another scholarship recipient in a program designed to feed graduates into Australia's largest corporations, with their expected path being clear: graduate, accept a safe corporate job, climb the ladder, and feed the machine. But in 2001, everything changed. In an act that would soon alter the course of his life, Mike sends a single email to his university classmates. His message was short and ambiguous. Anyone interested in starting a tech company after graduation? Only one person responds, and that was Scott Farquhar, a fellow scholarship recipient with an equally restless itch to change the world. You see, what Mike fails to realize is that in an instant, this one simple email just set the creation of Australia's first technological unicorn in motion. He and Scott Farquhar will soon prove that extraordinary business empires can spring from the most ordinary circumstances. In 2002, the notorious dot-com crash had devastated tech valuations and left venture capital scarce.
On the US markets. This closing bell might as well.
Silicon Valley watched startups collapse on the daily.
The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank is causing shockwaves across the entire business world.
But meanwhile, in Sydney, Australia, Mike Cannon-Brookes and Scott Farquhar see opportunity where others see ruin. Armed with 2 freshly printed degrees from New South Wales, Mike and Scott face a choice by accepting the standard 9-to-5 with a starting salary of $48,500 or gamble that stability on a never-before-executed idea. Refusing to sacrifice their lives to the rat race, Mike and Scott choose the gamble and max out $10,000 in credit cards to launch the software management company Atlassian. Their breakthrough isn't technological, but rather strategic. While competitors hire expensive sales teams and chase venture capital, Mike and Scott choose to embrace radical simplicity by building software that can sell itself with no sales team required. To make this work, they had to start with a foolproof product. Atlassian's first launch is Jira, a software that was originally made as a bug tracking tool for highly successful businesses. Customers can download Jira and try it for free before purchasing it directly online, and they never have to answer a sales call or deal with the back and forth of lengthy enterprise negotiations. Jira is just quality software at a transparent price.
To the early 2000s mentality, Mike and Scott's approach was so unconventional that it bordered on naivete. Traditional wisdom demanded that enterprise sales teams grow business software, but traditional wisdom just crashed with the dot-com bubble. Everything anyone thought they knew had collapsed, which left a clear pathway and enticing opportunity for a new wave strategy to emerge.
And to most people's surprise, including the founders themselves, the validation of this new wave strategy comes unexpectedly when Mike and Scott discover a purchase order in their fax machine from the largest airline in the world, American Airlines, on a seemingly random morning. They were confused since neither founder had contacted the airline directly, so the Fortune 500 company stumbled upon Jira online themselves. Apparently, they tested it, loved it, and proceeded to buy it, the exact salesless method that Mike and Scott were betting on for Atlassian's success. This gave Mike the insight that they've accidentally revolutionized enterprise software sales. This groundbreaking method is more than just cost-cutting. It's market disruption disguised as necessity. Success tends to breed ambition for disruptors, and Mike Cannon-Brookes and Scott Farquhar had just felt the rush of their first entrepreneurial hit. Just 2 years later, in 2004, Atlassian scales to 2,000 paying customers and begins to generate steady profits, a rarity in the post-crash landscape. Because of their rapid growth, Mike's vision was quickly extending beyond just bug-tracking software. Atlassian's next release is a project management and knowledge-sharing platform called Confluence that was launched in 2005. While competitors focus on single products, Mike builds an integrated suite of applications. But Atlassian's strategy is calculated and intentional. Once development teams adopt Jira for project management, Confluence becomes their next natural choice for documentation. While Mike and Scott's revolutionary strategies click into place, Atlassian's revenue soars to $14.9 million by 2006, and it's now a global operation with a rapidly growing team.
But what was most impressive about the company thus far was its profitability without venture capital, a strategy that was unprecedented for a scaling software company at the time. Their bootstrap approach that began from necessity had become their competitive advantage.
Entrepreneurship 101 would tell you the next logical move for any growing business is expansion. Staying true to their unconventional theme, and unlike their Silicon Valley counterparts forcing expansion through sales efforts, Mike Cannon-Brookes and Scott Farquhar choose geographical growth based on organic demand. But by 2007, Mike recognizes that organic growth with only in-house products has its limits. The risky decision to move away from carrying only Atlassian-made products comes with their acquisition of developer software company Senqua, a move that also expands their reach into development analytics tools. This is their first major bet on building through acquisition rather than pure organic development. And what Mike hasn't fully grasped yet is that he's pioneering what will become the dominant software business model of freemium distribution, integrated product suites, and global reach through digital channels. This successful sales methodology he's building will soon support ambitions far beyond software. Atlassian goes public on December 10th, 2015, and the NASDAQ trading floor buzzes as shares begin trading under the symbol TEAM.
Software company Atlassian went public today at the NASDAQ, pricing above expectations in a tech IPO market that had been lackluster so far this year. I'm joined now by the company's co-CEOs, Scott Farquhar and Mike Cannon-Brookes. Gentlemen, congratulations. Nice to see you both.
With an opening at $27, the stock rockets past $29 in minutes. And Atlassian's market capitalization? $4.37 billion.
Atlassian, which makes collaboration and software development tools like HipChat, ended its first day as a public company up 32%. So that puts Atlassian's value just under $6 billion, making it one of the strongest IPOs of the entire year.
For Mike Cannon-Brookes, now 36, the IPO represents more than financial success. The once detrimental $10,000 credit card debt has become a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, and he and Scott Farquhar are officially Australia's first technology billionaires. But Mike Cannon-Brookes soon learns wealth creates new responsibilities. As Atlassian's success grows, so does Mike's awareness of climate change and the company's negatively impactful carbon footprint. The software industry's detrimental effect on the Earth's health begins to trouble him. which leads to a total indigestibility toward Australia's nonsensical dependence on coal power. For Mike Cannon-Brookes, the gap between technological progress and environmental regression becomes impossible to ignore. If switching to green energy was an easy sell to any country or company, then it would have happened years ago. Mike knows it won't be an easy argument to make, so he begins subtly with Atlassian committing to a transition to renewable energy. After he clears away the environment's guilt from his own company, Mike starts investing in clean technology through his family office, Grok Ventures. Mike Cannon-Brookes' focus shifts dramatically, and by 2018, the climate crisis wasn't just an environmental challenge, but the ultimate entrepreneurial opportunity. Mike sees opportunity where no one has dared to speak out on before. The ones who have tried are usually scared away from corporate bigwigs and stubborn shareholders entangled with the government.
You see, Australia possesses unlimited wind and solar resources, yet for some reason remains locked in fossil fuel dependence that's lasted for centuries. For Mike Cannon-Brookes, the business case for renewable energy transformation is painstakingly clear.
When dealing with millionaire shareholders in any business, the stakes couldn't be higher. In Australia's case, the country generates nearly half its emissions from electricity that derive mostly from coal, and mostly from the largest utility, AGL Energy. AGL Energy operates as Australia's biggest polluter, producing a staggering 8% of the country's total emissions. For Mike Cannon-Brookes, the relentless go-getting entrepreneur, they represent the perfect target for real impact and long-term sustainability. For some, going after AGL would appear like elitist arrogance coming from a billionaire who is out of touch with reality. And there would be a small bit of truth to this, as Mike doesn't anticipate that challenging Australia's energy establishment will be far more complex than disrupting the enterprise software markets. The year 2022 marks a fundamental shift for Mike Cannon-Brookes. On the Atlassian front, after 2 decades of daily co-leadership with Scott Farquhar, Mike begins drifting towards a singular vision. Mike's distraction with his monumental project to acquire AGL Energy forces Scott to focus more on product development and internal operations, which would later prove to put a strain on their tech bromance. With Scott taking most of the responsibility at Atlassian, Mike Cannon-Brookes can now fully embrace the company's external battles like climate activism, renewable energy investments, and corporate confrontations. Atlassian's leadership transition crystallizes with Mike's $1.5 billion climate pledge at COP26. But the move is more than just business diversification. It's a fully realized transformation for the global software company and its founder. This begins Mike's evolution from software executive to climate crusader by using his Atlassian fortune to fund Australia's transition to renewable energy. With a newfound sense of confidence, Mike dives fully into his pursuit of AGL Energy. Through his investment firm, Grok Ventures, Mike manages to accumulate an 11.3% stake in Australia's largest fossil fuel emitter.
I'm Mike Cannon-Brookes, and today I represent the largest shareholder of AGL, but I need your help.
But why would Cannon-Brookes want to own a sizable portion of Australia's top polluter? so he could have the political weight to force the fossil fuel titan to abandon coal power 15 years ahead of their planned schedule.
The founder of software giant Atlassian wants to turn AGL into a clean energy provider and stop the company's demerger, which would spin off its coal-fired power stations into a new entity that would keep running until 2045.
The plants themselves have significant grid access, which is needed if you're going to build out large-scale renewable storage facilities.
What follows next is a proxy battle that reveals Mike's strategic evolution, and it's a far stretch from the cautious bootstrap approach that built Atlassian. Once a timid scholarship student in full control of his own meteoric success, the billionaire now finds himself at the behest of Australia's most powerful fossil fuel advocates. But just as Mike Cannon-Brookes learned at an early age, most things worth having don't come without sacrifice. On the Atlassian front, it was becoming unavoidably clear that Mike's long-term interests lie outside of the daily operations, and the once private tensions over the topic with co-founder Scott Farquhar begin surfacing publicly. Mike's climate activism demands attention that conflicts with Atlassian, and the tech bromance partnership that launched the software company faces strain as Mike and Scott's visions drastically diverge.
A quick glimpse into the future tells us the souring partnership comes to an inevitable end when Scott Farquhar announces his resignation as co-CEO in April 2024, leaving Mike Cannon-Brookes as sole leader of Atlassian. Scott's official reason is family time and philanthropy, but the reality is far more complex. It's evident that Mike's transformation into a climate warrior has fundamentally altered the duo's partnership, with people close to the duo confirming their tech breakup is irreconcilable.
But if there's one thing that life has taught Mike Cannon-Brookes, it's that every transformation carries a heavy cost. And when his journey toward climate leadership started in 2022, he had no idea it would exact a price he never anticipated. In March of 2022, Mike Cannon-Brookes faces his most formidable adversary yet. And this time, it's not a software competitor. It's Australia's deeply entrenched fossil fuel establishment, and his target? AGL Energy, the nation's largest greenhouse gas emitter and a company that has operated unchallenged for decades. Mike Cannon-Brookes' battle for sustainable energy begins when he launches a bold $8.25 billion takeover bid alongside Canadian asset manager Brookfield. Their plan is bold but revolutionary. They want to invest around $20 billion into replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy and storage, which they could build even more clean energy products around.
Look, this is a fantastic opportunity at this particular stage in our decarbonisation journey, right? It has a huge potential, I think, to deliver a lot more than it's currently delivering. And it also happens to be Australia's largest emitter, right? It's about 8% of Australia's emissions. As a single company, is more than the emissions of Sweden, Ireland, or New Zealand.
For Australia's energy sector, this represents an existential threat and a temporary disturbance to their comfort and cash flow. And AGL's board, led by Chairman Peter Botten, proves to be shrewder than expected. They reject the offer outright, labeling it opportunistic, elitist behavior from a selfish billionaire. Before Mike's offer, AGL had proposed their own demerger that would split its coal assets from its renewable energy and retail business. But Mike campaigned against this plan, arguing AGL's coal assets would suffer and they would ultimately lose more money. AGL's rejection proves to be a quick learning lesson for Mike. He discovers that disrupting energy markets demands vastly different weapons than those required to conquer the software industry. In tech, superior products always win, but in energy, regulatory capture, political connections, and institutional inertia create nearly impenetrable barriers. The proxy war between Mike Cannon-Brookes and AGL Energy reveals his evolution from software entrepreneur to corporate combatant and green energy warrior. After the failed deal, he systematically builds alliances with institutional investors and creates valid, compelling arguments that coal assets represent stranded investments. But Mike Cannon-Brookes' message is calculated. He believes climate transition is inevitable, and early movers will capture value while laggards face obsolescence.
But Mike soon recognizes that the convergence of the climate crisis and technological disruption represent the ultimate entrepreneurial moment. And the only way to beat the fossil fuel industry is to speak their language with safe and measurable profits.
Rather than retreat after the AGL battle, Mike doubles down on his climate investments. And in May 2023, Grok Ventures successfully outbids Andrew Forrest to acquire Sun Cable, giving him majority control of the world's most ambitious renewable energy project. Through his Sun Cable project, Mike Cannon-Brookes plans to build the world's largest solar farm in Australia's Northern Territory. A $30 billion project that will export clean energy to Singapore via undersea cables and transform Australia into a renewable energy superpower.
If this project gets built, it will be literally the biggest renewable energy project in Australia. But the thing that makes this project really ambitious is not necessarily the size, but the idea of making Australia into an electricity exporter, which is just not something that we do at the moment. We're an island and all the electricity that's made here stays here. So that's really the thing that makes this project very different, I think, to some of the other large renewable projects, both here and overseas.
The groundbreaking green energy project becomes Mike's vindication strategy. By successfully developing the Australia-Asia Power Link, Mike can demonstrate that his climate investments produce measurable results by showing the undersea cables deliver clean energy to 15% of Singapore's electricity needs at a fraction of the cost of coal. Meanwhile, his AGL campaign would prove to achieve partial victory. Though the takeover bid failed, Mike's shareholder activism forced management changes and accelerated decarbonization commitments, with the company agreeing to close coal plants by 2035 rather than 2045, a significant yet incomplete success. But the world Mike operates within is continuing to fundamentally transform. Climate change has shifted from environmental concern to economic imperative, and Atlassian's COP26 commitments demand massive capital reallocation from fossil fuels to renewables. Simultaneously, in a global cultural shift that would test Cannon-Brookes' adaptability, artificial intelligence emerges as the defining technology of the decade. And the same software tools that helped build Mike Cannon-Brookes' fortune now threaten human employment in his own company. The irony of the situation is profound, as Mike's success depends on innovative technology that increasingly displaces human workers. Once again, Mike Cannon-Brookes is dealing with the themes of contradiction and sacrifice. On a broader scale, Australia also faces its own inflection point. Despite processing world-class solar and wind resources, the nation remains locked in climate policy paralysis. Political leaders champion fossil fuel exports while promising net zero emissions. The contradiction creates opportunity for those like Mike Cannon-Brookes who are bold enough to force change, but what Mike doesn't fully appreciate is how these macro forces will soon expose the contradictions in his own position. On March 14, 2025, Mike Cannon-Brookes faces a crisis of credibility that threatens to undermine years of his climate advocacy when Australian media reports reveal the billionaire has purchased a Bombardier Global 7500 private jet worth approximately $75 million.
Let's start with the billionaire climate campaigner Mike Cannon-Brookes. Now, as all good climate alarmists do, he's gone and bought himself a private jet, which the Financial Review revealed yesterday. Well, today he said he suffered a deep internal conflict about it. He said he just had to do it so I can run a global business from Australia and still be a constantly present dad, which was, quote unquote, hard, continual trade-off I've had to make. But it's okay, he says, because, quote, I have an extremely rigorous carbon regime for all my flying, including using direct air capture and sustainable fuels for the carbon and contrails to far exceed my flight footprint. Well, there you go. If only we knew it was that easy, that by having a private jet, Joe, you are the most environmentally friendly bloke on the face of the earth.
As one can expect, the backlash is immediate and brutal, with critics seizing the almost comical hypocrisy. How can Australia's most prominent climate activist justify owning one of the most carbon-intensive forms of transportation? It's a question that even Mike's most loyal supporters have a hard time answering. Even the Deputy Prime Minister, Barnaby Joyce, calls him a total, utter hypocrite. Climate activists feel betrayed, business critics see confirmation of elite hypocrisy, and media coverage focuses on the gap between public principles and private privilege. But Mike Cannon-Brookes will soon find out the private jet controversy is merely the prelude to a significantly more damaging revelation. Just a few months later, on July 30th, 2025, Mike delivers layoff notifications to 150 Atlassian employees via pre-recorded video, with many positions being eliminated in favor of artificial intelligence automation. The optics are catastrophic for Atlassian. Coincidentally, the same morning, co-founder Scott Farquhar addresses the National Press Club to enthusiastically promote Australia's AI revolution, with Mike's video layoffs occurring hours before Scott's speech celebrating technological progress.
Yet the other co-founder, Mike Farquhar, has been talking up the job and investment opportunities for Australia from AI and the related data centres.
I think there's a great opportunity for us to go out to governments in the region and attract their investment to build data centres in Australia.
In what seems to be a serendipitous act of bad timing, both Mike and Scott accidentally give and solidify the message that Atlassian favors cheap machines over genuine, hardworking employees.
While this most likely isn't how Mike or Scott feel, the theme proves to ring true to the sacrifice for success theme that ran throughout Mike Cannon-Brookes' life up to this point. What comes from the loss of the humanless, automated, capable roles and subsequent PR nightmare is undeniable success. The AI integration that generated layoff controversy also drove product innovation, which prepares Atlassian for the next technological wave.
Mike Cannon-Brookes still commands a complex empire spanning software, renewable energy, and climate activism, and his net worth of $12.18 billion makes him Australia's fourth richest resident. And Atlassian now serves over 300,000 customers globally and generates $5.2 billion in annual revenue. But Mike's success doesn't stop there. Through Grok Ventures, he controls Sun Cable's development of revolutionary solar export infrastructure, and his 10% stake in AGL Energy positions him as Australia's most influential shareholder activist. Yet his influence continues to extend beyond finance. As an adjunct professor at the University of New South Wales and chairman of Blackbird Ventures, Mike is helping to shape the next generation of Australian entrepreneurs, showing his life-hungry students that what once seemed impossible just takes hard work, strategy, and sacrifice. Mike's most recent focus centers on proving that business success and climate action work best together. The Sun Cable project represents his ultimate test. Can private capital deliver the infrastructure transformation that governments have failed to achieve? The answer will determine whether Mike Cannon-Brookes is remembered as a visionary who helped save Australia's climate, or a hypocritical billionaire who preached sustainability while living unsustainably.
And so taking that into account, what do you think are the prospects of this actually getting up?
It's really anyone's guess, Joe. I don't like to bet on these sorts of things, but, it's certainly hugely ambitious. And, I think that there is a staged approach being taken. I think they're building I'm not exactly sure this number. I think it's 1.8 gigawatts first, which is kind of comparable to sort of largish solar projects. It's that part of it that's really the really big next step. If you can't get the off-taker in Singapore, then what this will be is a large solar farm in Central Australia, potentially selling its electricity into Darwin.
Perhaps the most profound lesson lies not in Mike's successes or failures, but in his willingness to evolve. The shy scholarship student became a global entrepreneur. The software executive became a climate warrior. The climate activist grapples with the contradictions of extreme wealth. Only time will provide the ultimate verdict on the climate billionaire.